Attention, because what's happening right now in Israel and throughout the entire region is very delicate. What's happened in the past few hours follows the usual pattern seen in military logistics. When something big is being prepared, first people are moved, then the pieces are put in place, and finally the order comes. Greetings, I'm Ari, and today, the 14th of in Israel, the feeling is clear. We are no longer in a chapter of threats and speeches. We are in the chapter of operational preparation. Because when the United States and its allies start pulling personnel out of key bases, when the ports fill up with ships that prefer to wait in the water before docking, when global positioning system interference appears in sensitive areas, that's not done for sport. That's done when someone is calculating the cost of retaliation. Let's get to the point. In the last few hours, several indicators have come together that separately could be explained, but together they form a pattern. First, the public alert. Security advisories were issued for citizens and United States personnel throughout the region, asking them to limit movement near military installations. This, translated into real language, means don't go near a possible military target. The other thing is what's happening behind the advisory. Today, it was reported that the United States began relocating personnel and assets from Al Hudaid base in Qatar. Al Hudaid is not just any base. It's one of the nerve centers of the United States military presence in the region. In military doctrine, when non-essential personnel are removed, what they're saying is, if we get hit back, there won't be civilians or support staff in the middle. Now, why Qatar and why Al Hudaid? Well, because Iran has been repeating the same message for days. If there is a United States attack, the targets won't just be Israel. They will also be United States bases and assets. And watch out, countries in the region that facilitate or host operations by either the United States or Israel. And when a regime like the Iranian one says it out loud, it's not to impress people on X, it's part of their deterrence strategy, which is something they can also put into practice. And we already saw that in the 12-day war in June of last year.
And how do the gunshots sound? Look, now wait.
Meanwhile, the second indicator appears, commented Festina. The United Kingdom is also moving its pieces. Today, a British aircraft was reported moving toward the region with a transport evacuation profile. There isn't much information to confirm the details of the flight, and minute by minute, and in this, well, as always, I'm responsible. But the pattern of the Allies is consistent. If Washington raises the level, London puts on its helmet. People think that the start of a war is when the first missile falls, but it really doesn't work that way. The real beginning is when decisions become irreversible. When personnel have already been moved, when logistics have already been set up, when prepositioning has already been done, when a whole strategic movement has taken place, it's not arbitrary and it doesn't make sense. If it's all just a show, well, believe it or not, all of it. That movement involves a huge amount of money. And that's the point where reputation, security, and money are being put at risk. And nobody does that. Then to say it was just a distraction, and if it was, well, it was for something much bigger. That's why the focus isn't on whether Trump says he's going to attack. The focus is on what they're doing, and there's just too much stealing going on. There are rumors right now on social media that Trump's decision has already been made, and the only thing left is to know when. Let's discuss the military board. Many people are looking at the sky waiting for B-2SB-52S or whatever may come. Modern warfare often begins on the ground, not in the sky. There is talk about this, and I want to clarify that this is based on reports and leaks from the local press. And it's the presence of a United States Ohio-class submarine or a cruise missile platform here in the region. And if that's confirmed, then obviously it changes the whole equation. Why? Because a submarine with cruise missiles is the perfect tool for the first wave. Precision and surprise strikes, since they can't be detected until the missile is already in the air, which is a problem for anyone. And even more so when the submarine is right off your coast, but you don't know exactly where it is. What if someone? And you ask me, what is the logical target of this first wave? Well, analysts say the following. First, degrade anti-air defenses. Second, blind the radars. Third, take down command and control nodes. Fourth, Open corridors so that what comes next can enter with less risk. Now, there's a very important nuance here to avoid exaggerations. Today, the United States naval presence in the Middle East seems smaller than it was a year ago. Last year, around this same time, for example, when the United States ship Harry Truman was operating in the region to deter and confront the Houthis in Yemen, the deployment was much heavier. A nuclear supercarrier and a large group of destroyers accompanying it, in addition to other ships with anti-missile defense capabilities, in the Mediterranean. And what has changed? Well, in recent months, the Pentagon has had to move resources to other fronts. And one of those moves was the reinforcement in the Caribbean, because of the situation in Venezuela, which we were also covering here on the channel. As a result, there is a noticeable reduction in presence in areas like the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, or the Persian Gulf. The United States Navy doesn't usually publicly disclose the exact number of ships in real time in the region, but this week they did confirm a key piece of information. The guided missile destroyer, United States ship Roosevelt, Arleigh Burke class, transited the Persian Gulf and is operating within the area of responsibility of the United States Central Command. Here in the region now, what would be targeted if the strike finally happens here? It is worth noting that many are saying the attack could happen tonight, in the early morning hours here in the Middle East, or even tomorrow. We don't know, but in that sense, there are two narratives, there are two possibilities. The first is the one everyone knows, a new attack on important nuclear centers in Iran. The second, which sounds more political but is just as military, is targeting internal repression nodes. Today, reports circulated that Washington is evaluating a broad list of targets, at least about 50, not only nuclear facilities, but also command infrastructure, Revolutionary Guard bases, and key points used to control the streets, which is exactly where all eyes are focused right now. Given the repression by the regime against all the people who are protesting, it's been more than 2 weeks now. Simple language? It's not just about stopping Iran's nuclear program, which is already almost gone, but about completely weakening its machinery. And if this goes in that direction, the intention wouldn't just be to destroy buildings, it would be to change the internal balance. Now, what Trump has said publicly doesn't help calm things down at all, and actually creates even more confusion and speculation. When he was asked about possible Iranian retaliation if he counterattacked, his response was in his usual tone, in his own style, he said. They've said that before, and you saw what happened. And when he was asked about the assistance that had been promised to the Iranians, he said, "You'll find out soon enough." This clearly isn't diplomacy, it's psychological pressure, which explains why it's such a delicate situation. But before I dive in, I want to share with you the story of this vial, which amazed me and I think you should know about too. This vial holds an unbelievable story that was unheard until now. Inside is earth from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, rescued by archaeologists after thousands of years of history were dumped as rubble. It is our opportunity to prevent history from disappearing. Start the new year with a personal connection to Jerusalem. Click the link in bio or scan the code to enjoy a special offer. One thing is a limited operation. Another thing is an operation that the regime interprets as an attempt to overthrow them. Because in that case, Iran might decide that the cost of staying quiet is worse than the cost of expanding the conflict. And that's why the entire region is getting ready. So let's move on to Israel, because here we all feel that something is coming. You can feel it in the air. And here in Israel, when there are signs that Iran or any of its proxies might react or attack, 3 things usually happen. First, the military and all government agencies go on high alert. Second, air defense deployments are adjusted. And third, municipalities start checking shelters, protocols, and communications. And that's exactly what's being felt right now. Preparatory movements, some of which are visible and others that are being carried out very quietly. Today, there have also been movements of air defense batteries in areas that are most vulnerable, like these deployed to protect the city of Jerusalem. And that's because if real attention is being paid, as we saw today in areas like Dimona, which is a huge strategic symbol, that's where Israel's nuclear reactor is located. So, are we talking about a scenario where a real ballistic exchange is expected, not just a scare? And let's add to this another topic that also generated a lot of conversation today: the flight of the Israeli Prime Minister's plane, the state plane. There was a lot of speculation. The plane took off, flew for a few hours along with another Turkish plane. They were in the air for 3 hours and then landed again, keeping in mind that Netanyahu was not on board. What was said was that it was a maintenance flight. Then different versions appeared saying it was a routine mission and others that it was for training. Which one should we believe? Well, with what's important. When there is tension with Iran and Israel, they protect critical assets, disperse capabilities, and reduce vulnerability. It doesn't mean it has already started, but it does mean that precautions are being taken and many measures are being implemented. And meanwhile, on the other side, the Ansar Allah Houthis in Yemen are also raising their tone and their level of preparedness. Because if the United States gets fully involved, they understand that they could become immediate targets, especially if they try to open a front against Israel. Today, reports noted missile movements in both Yemen and Iraq. Now, what happens inside Iran is a different story, and this is where urgency mixes with tragedy. Iran is going through a brutal internal crisis. There are reports of thousands of deaths and a harsh repression. But there's a big problem: verification. Why? Because the regime has implemented the well-known internet blackouts, which have intensified to the point of reaching 100% blockage and restriction of connectivity. And when a country goes digitally dark, what happens inside becomes a fog of informational war. Still, information leaks out. And one phenomenon that's being talked about a lot is the use of Starlink by people inside Iran to communicate with the outside world, even while moving, in cars. Like the images you're seeing on screen where they're trying to avoid being located. This is a sign that the population is looking for any window to breathe, information-wise. But at the same time, it's reported that the regime is trying to interfere, block, and locate those points where information is leaking out. And in the midst of that environment, the Iranian judicial authorities have spoken of swift and decisive punishments. Translation: summary trials and a heavy-handed approach, which even lead to executions. All this must be understood. If the United States decides to attack in support of the protesters, the regime will try to portray it as the external enemy. It's behind everything, and this could either divide part of the population or make them even more fired up. But in both cases, what comes next is very dangerous, because the regime could become more aggressive both internally and externally at the same time. And that's why, for me, the most worrying indicator isn't some posts made on X. It's the operational silence when relocations begin, when protection is accelerated, when maritime trade changes its behavior, when allies align. It's because something is about to happen now. There's also an economic fact on the table. A 25% tariff was announced for countries doing business with Iran. This is clearly a United States-imposed sanction. This is important because it shows that Washington is using total pressure, military, economic, and political. And when those three are combined, well, it's usually not to hold a press conference. Today, it was reported that 5 Iranian banks are about to go bankrupt. One more push, and without a doubt, they'll collapse. As we can see, everything is moving very, very fast. Now, is there something that could determine whether this remains a one-time blow or turns into something much bigger? Because after an initial phase, that is, an attack by the United States, everything will depend on how Iran responds. If the Iranian reaction is limited to American targets, bases, ships, or military assets, it's most likely that we're seeing a game of pressure and containment. Strike, response, and then negotiation, with their teeth clenched tightly. Hard, dangerous, but still very limited, still very restricted and controlled. But there is a line that if Iran crosses, it changes the game completely, and that line is a direct attack against Israel. Because the moment Iran decides to strike Israel openly, we would no longer be talking only about retaliation against the United States, but we would be talking about a qualitative leap. That could give Washington and its allies, in this case also Israel, the political and military legitimacy to expand the operation to a second stage, much more intense and much more complex, which of course would give the green light to Israel to go on the offensive. It means a second stage. Well, the objectives are no longer just deterrent, that is, to show strength and send a message, but they become structural, to weaken the regime, seriously neutralize its missile capabilities, and strike the nuclear program more deeply. Simply put, if Iran limits itself to hitting the United States, the escalation can be contained. But if it decides to turn this into a direct clash with Israel, then the conflict could enter another dimension, with consequences that could redefine the balance of the entire region. And here I want to add a key point that many people are not bringing to the table. There is a target that, at least until now, has not been touched by either the United States or Israel in that lightning war in June, in the 12-day war where forces were tested and messages were sent. And that target is the one that could really paralyze Iran's oil infrastructure within hours. Why could this become the #1 target if the conflict escalates and Israel gets fully involved? Because oil is not just a resource. In Iran's case, it's the main source of funding for the regime. That's where the economic oxygen that sustains the regime comes from, supporting the Revolutionary Guard and the entire apparatus that keeps this regime running. In critical oil facilities, refineries, terminals, storage sites, and export points. This isn't just sending a symbolic message, they're directly reaching into the regime's pocket, which would be its Achilles heel. Here is the cold logic. A well-aimed blow to that infrastructure not only reduces income, it also creates immediate internal pressure, fuel, transportation, electricity, prices, inflation. That is, daily life becomes chaos in a matter of days. That's why many analysts believe that if this escalates and enters a second stage, oil could go from being untouchable to being the red button, because targeting it would mean seeking a quick end, cutting off funding, and accelerating a political collapse through economic and social pressure. What would be missing from this whole revolution that the Iranians are carrying out against the regime right now? Well, this is also the most dangerous part, because when oil is targeted, Iran may feel that it's no longer a limited operation, but rather an attempt at absolute suffocation. And that's where the conflict could escalate much further. And at this point, a phrase published by a security official on Channel 12 in Israel fits very well, just a few hours ago. The official stated that if Iran attacks, they will move to overthrow the regime without further warnings. This marks a major shift, as we would stop discussing limited operations aimed at containment or punishment. We would be talking about a scenario where, if Iran responds with a strong blow, the response could aim to end the game for good. And when someone openly talks about overthrowing the regime, that's when targets like oil stop being a theoretical deterrent and become a central tool. Because cutting off funding literally means cutting off the regime's ability to sustain itself. That's not even mentioning an attempt to eliminate the top leaders of the Iranian regime, including Ayatollah Khamenei. Surely, the Mossad knows what he's eating right now. So, my dear friends, we are just hours away from an attack. I'm not going to play prophet with the clock. No serious person would claim the United States will be attacked at 3 a.m., but we can say this. We are seeing signs consistent with a scenario where the United States is preparing to act while trying to reduce its vulnerability to regional retaliation. And if it is confirmed that the order was given, the start could be sudden, it could be tonight. In modern operations, surprise is clearly a weapon. Although with all the development of technology and the whole internet thing, as open as it is today, well, it's not that much of a surprise. Many movements are clearly visible. It's especially important if you live in Israel or have family here. This is not the time to panic, but it's also not the time to ignore it. Check that you have water, flashlights, batteries, and chargers, know where the nearest shelter is, keep important documents handy, and set up all the necessary protocols at home to get to the shelters in time. Pay close attention to the guidelines that will surely be coming through text messages to all phones, as is usual in this type of situation. Please don't listen to TikTok rumors. We need to stay alert, as an attack could happen tonight or tomorrow, but we aren't sure. I'll be broadcasting live here, covering everything minute by minute. So it's very important that you subscribe to the channel, and even more important that you hit the bell. That will allow the platform to notify you when I've uploaded a new video or when I've started a live broadcast. I also invite you to check out the memberships, because there we have a private group where we share updates and real-time information through WhatsApp. So, my friends, the region is entering a delicate phase. The Iranian regime is under internal pressure, the United States is increasing external pressure, Israel is in prevention mode and on high alert. And when these three things come together, history usually moves very fast. We already know this from experience.